Started. Hi, everybody, and thank you for attending the 2022 Food Justice Summit Feedback Meeting in the Middle, a collaborative effort between the Adirondack Health Institute and the Adirondack Food Systems Network. My name is Megan Doman. I'm the Farm to Institution Educator at Cornell Cooperative Extension in Essex County. This session, Bringing Our Food System to Life Online, is presented by Filippi from Cornell Cooperative Extension of St. Lawrence County. Before we kick off this session, we want to give a huge shout out to our sponsors for making this event possible. We are so thankful for their support and want to give a special shout out to the keynote and premier sponsors, New York State Health Foundation and Glens Falls National Bank and Trust Company. We also want to go over some brief housekeeping before we get started. During the session, you will be muted with your video off for the entirety of the presentation. If you have any questions or comments, you can put them in the chat box and one of us will be monitoring the chat and we'll be able to assist you. At the end of the presentation, we'll have time for Q&A. If there are pertinent questions throughout, we'll definitely answer them as they come up. All these presentations will be recorded and archived on the 2022 Food Justice Summit webpage found at ahihealth.org/2022FJS. Lastly, tomorrow we'll be sending out a survey and we'd love to hear your feedback. So keep an eye out for that in your inboxes. And now I'm going to turn it over to Flip to introduce herself and give her presentation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Megan. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm jazzed to share with folks and leave time at the end for your questions. I'm going to cover a lot of territory, about 2 years worth of thinking about how to communicate about local foods in the online remote world that we got plunged into. My name is Filippi and I work at the Extension Learning Farm, which is located in Canton, New York. So probably farther north than where a bunch of you all are, but you're welcome up anytime. So I'll share my screen. All right, so what we're going to do, as I mentioned, I'm the local food program leader here at the Learning Farm. And what we're going to do today is go through just quickly, just get a sense if you haven't visited us here before, what we're up to at the Learning Farm, and then going into specifics about activities that we used to do in person and then how we migrated them online or new ways to communicate with folks. Before I get going, so we're going to talk about a blog, we're going to talk about live streaming, we're going to talk about moving in-person kitchen classes to online kitchen classes. But I'd love it if folks could just type in the chat, have you live streamed before to communicate about your organization or about your farm? Have you done any online cooking classes? Just if folks could get a sense of the group and who's here and the types of activities that you've done online, I'd love to hear that. So if folks could just introduce themselves and say like, I wouldn't live stream with a 10-foot pole, or yeah, I tried that out, and I'd just like to hear a little bit more about who's in the group and what you're interested in. And I have to remember to actually pull the chat back up. There we go. All right. As I mentioned, we're up here in Canton, New York on a farm property. So I work for Cornell Cooperative Extension of St. Lawrence County. If you haven't heard of Extension, Megan and I are in 2 different counties. So I serve St. Lawrence, she serves Essex County. And there's about, I think, 60 different associations all across New York State. So in different counties, some of them might be in office buildings. 2 in New York are actually on learning farms. So you can see the building here in the front. In this renovated part of the barn is actually where the harvest kitchen is. You can see the high tunnel in the back where our master gardeners work. We have a sugar bush here and maple sugar. Our farm manager, we have a BOCES Ag Academy actually in the back classroom. And so there's a junior and senior program, day-long program. In the front classroom, we run a farm day camp in the summer and an after-school program. So lots of hands-on activities. And so we were really interested in continuing to connect with people, obviously, when we were going remote. So I actually grew up in the area about 20 miles from here in DeKalb, New York on a homestead. So just about every day and night, I feel like I'm breathing vegetables and small scale agriculture. It's really my passion and interest from my very earliest days. So I have a community farm with my partner Bob called Little Grass Foodworks, which is a few miles from here, and we do free choice CSA shares. And so here in my role at the Learning Farm, as local food program leader, I have the good fortune to have a teaching space built in right here called the Harvest Kitchen. And as well as that, I guess I'd say I work with folks everywhere from consumer to producer. So it might be consumers looking to have a stronger connection with foods that are available that are grown in their area. And so sourcing and finding and accessing those foods, all the way to producers looking at increased visibility for their product. We have other people, so I work in the Ag and Food Systems department, and we also have a local food marketing and development educator, and we also define local food as things that people are growing on their own. So we include gardening, education, and kind of DIY stuff in that as well. And so the Harvest Kitchen is a place that people rent as a shared use incubator space, but then we also offer workshops out of it about starting your own food business. It's cool. It sounds like there's some folks that do some different online activities, which is excellent. You'll see some photos kind of smattered throughout the presentation, and I'm mentioning this even though this isn't a very photo heavy presentation, but something that we've worked on over the last 4 or so years. Actually, we secured money to offer free professional photo shoots to all direct market producers here that sell goods in St. Lawrence County. So to date, we've done nearly 80 of those. So nearly 80 different farms and food businesses that produce or raise food here in St. Lawrence County and have it for sale direct. And I'm mentioning it because we found it infinitely useful, whether COVID or not, to be able to really bring the stories to life of the folks that are working so hard to raise or prepare our foods. And so that you'll see these images kind of littered throughout, and we really pride ourselves on avoiding the random wiki image and being able to really share the stories of our producers. So first off, Fruition last year around May, we decided basically we wanted to be communicating online in some new ways. And so we were kind of putting everything under the umbrella of Fruition. So you can see over on the left, the Fruition celebrates the rich traditions and resourceful innovations of North Country growers and eaters. Tune in for engaging stories of the farmers, gardeners, and cooks creating a delicious landscape and healthy local food system. So this blog, there's 3 of us here at our local extension that basically are the main generators of content. So whether we're reaching out to somebody like Amara Dunn downstate and she's talking about planting pollinator friendly plants, or you can see the categories here. So the main things that we're talking about is farm and farming, gardening here at the Learning Farm, resources for entrepreneurs, and seasonal eating. So we might put out content. For example, this is a post that I wrote about for farmers and producers about wintertime planning and making adjustments on their farm. But it would also include things like when we have a new farm or business come online in the area. This eatery started last month, 2 months ago in downtown Potsdam. So usually in terms of thinking about how to recognize and promote those producers, if a new business opens up, we'll reach out to them, we'll offer them a free professional photo shoot. Then we can do kind of a photo essay or a little Q&A or something to kind of introduce them to the public. And then the next part of that, I won't make you too dizzy on that. But then the next part of it goes into where we tie that in beyond the blog into this live stream showcase. So last year we tried, I basically decided to just bite the bullet and try it out. And so we committed to once a month live streams. And so we called them the Fruition Local Food Showcase. And each month we had 3 different businesses that would be featured. And what was the same about them is they were the 3rd Wednesday of the month. They were an hour long. We showed photos throughout the live stream interview, and we just did them one at a time. So basically be 15 minutes a piece. So this month in December, John Bonaparte from Bare Bones Farms. So we we hear more about him and what they're up to on his farm. And then we go to Hurlbut's and we talk about their dairy and beef, and then we go to Hoof and Horn, and hear more about their cafe and eatery. We would ask for folks to contribute recipes, which the restaurants and the food businesses were much more excited about contributing recipes. I was really surprised how often a farmer was like, can't you just ask someone else that cooks our food for the recipes? So sometimes we'd get recipes right from the farmers, which we like to do, but it wasn't always, they weren't always interested, which is fine. And everyone needs to make the best use of their time. And then usually after each interview, we would have a giveaway. So maybe it'd be a quart of maple syrup or a $25 gift certificate to that food business. So yeah, Dan, we loved having Dan on at Triple Green Jade, and I know he's done some other, I actually just missed it because it was last Wednesday, Dan, where you had that online workshop. I'd love to hear how that went. So we found the prize giveaways to be really great in terms of the pros and cons of the live stream. So this is just like a little screenshot instead of playing the video. We used a platform called StreamYard. So StreamYard, you could basically stream to multiple platforms at the same time. So we weren't actually on Facebook Live, we were on StreamYard, and then you could preload in all of your photos. You could preload in videos if you want to, even URLs and links and things like that. So it could look more like a highly produced activity that you might see on TV if you're seeing like a TV broadcast, like they're using something where they can switch between multiple screens and viewers without getting shoved out of the way like Zoom loves to do. So it appears a little more cleanly. So I would say in terms of like what went well or not so well about that, I think it was really fun to do. The producers really liked doing it. It was a really low lift for them, instead of, we considered at one point doing basically on-site interviews, like doing a live stream on site, and you're just having to troubleshoot the background and troubleshoot the sound and the internet in a way that's a little bit too many hurdles to be able to upkeep every single month and really keep a tight show that's not really long. So we found this to be a good way to be able to offer 24 different businesses, that opportunity. We did it May to December last year. So to be able to offer that opportunity to people, be able to showcase their images from the photo shoots that we did, and also answer questions that people were asking. So you could type in questions on YouTube or Facebook, and we could ask the guests and they could answer them immediately. So that's something that we liked about it. I'm going to pause because we're going to go into talking about the Harvest Kitchen and those classes. If anyone does have any questions about the live stream specifically, I would be happy to answer those if you want to unmute yourself. And if not, that's fine. We'll just launch into the kitchen classes next. So as I mentioned, here at the Harvest Kitchen, it's a multi-use space. So we have the opportunity for people renting. Oh, they cannot unmute themselves. I'm sorry about that. I offered you something that I could not let you actually do, apparently. Well, if folks are welcome to type things into the chat, and if you do have questions about the, so yeah, Dan, it sounds like you can unmute yourself if you're interested now.
Yeah, I was just curious as to the it's setting this all up. Was it sort of a single person doing the effort start to finish? Did you have a team? Like, I guess, how involved was it to put together these live streams and to do the photo shoots and kind of all that fun stuff?
Well, the photo shoots we kind of have been doing it for multiple years. So at this point we have it's a little, I would say it's pretty easy. At the beginning, we had to kind of have the standards. How are we writing about it? What are we saying? How do we do, what's the language of the photo release? So the producers have 100% access to their images, but then we also, the photo release allows Cooperative Extension and the County Chamber of Commerce and Garden Share to also use those images. So that was a conscious decision at the beginning to allow multiple local organizations that all want to promote agriculture to have access to the images. So we do the shoots and then we give them the online gallery, and then they let us know if there's any that they don't want us to use, and we delete them from the galleries and don't use them going forward. And then the producers can do whatever they want with them. So we see them popping up, on their websites or in newspaper ads or their brochures and promotional materials. In terms of the actual live stream, I would say there were two of us that were kind of doing back end stuff. So there's the sort of social media leading up to it and letting people know about it and producing those materials. I'd say what took me the most time was I would meet with actually every producer for a few minutes beforehand and kind of hear what they were thinking about, they were most interested in talking about, and then write out questions. And then they'd see that draft. So, we'd have time for 8 or 10 questions. And I would try to really highlight things that were unique about their business. So maybe they had, an unusual background that brought them to agriculture, or perhaps they just have a very unique product. So I tried to let that lead. But it did take several hours of work before the actual live stream. Pretty much all the work happens before the live stream of producing it. And then putting together like a slideshow of images that kind of also side by side go well with what they're talking about at the time. So when they get on, all they have to do is answer questions. They don't have to worry about sharing slides or moving around their property or anything. We were trying to bring their places of business and their activities to life by way of them talking and their photos. Does that answer your question, Dan?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. Of course. Okay. Here we go. Okay, so if folks are seeing the Harvest Kitchen slide now, everyone's video is off, but hopefully you're seeing that slide. So as I mentioned, this is a multi-use space. You can see in this upper right corner, that's a hands-on lacto fermentation class that we were doing in the space. And in the bottom, this is actually a farm to school minimal processing. So the kitchen was opened really in 2016, but very late. It was finished in late 2015. And it has both the commercial kitchen space, but then like the wraparound infrastructure of a walk-in cooler and dry goods storage. There's a classroom right next to it. So we had a lot of really good material. And then when we were like, okay, well, we want to keep offering cooking classes, how are we going to do it online? That's kind of what the meat of what we're about to get into now. So I think I've covered this, but the main ways that the shared use space gets used. So caterers and mobile vendors and food businesses are renting it for their own activities, and they get their own permits and licenses. We do workshops and classes, both in person and online, about value-added entrepreneurship. And then we have a farm to school fresh cut that operates out of there 2 to 3 days of the week, that is buying local and New York State produce and just minimally processing, and it's going to 21 area BOCES schools. But what we're going to talk about is the workshops. So when I'm talking about workshops, we have consumer workshops. One I call Celebrating Local Food, which we had applied for money from the Alcoa Foundation to do education and to both for us to teach, but also to hire instructors to teach classes that were specifically incorporating foods grown in the area into basically building them around those versus just kitchen skills. And then I coordinate a group called the Master Food Preserver Volunteers. So we'll do everything from water bath or pressure canning to drying and freezing and dehydrating and lacto fermenting. So to give folks a sense of that, the farm to school is actually not super important. I'm just putting it in there because it's a big use of the kitchen. And it seems like a group that might want to know about that, but that's not really what this presentation is about. And this is an example of some of our value-added programming. And we've incorporated folks from Essex County and the North Country in our programming in the past. So the programming for consumers. So when we used to do it in person, it was important for us for folks to have an opportunity to actually, get their hands dirty. So usually we would limit it to 12 folks. They'd pay $20, which is, I'd say, pretty low for the amount of time and labor that goes into setting it up, but we are an educational facility. Usually we break into 3 or 4 groups. So, the ideal would be like 4 groups of 3. some classes we could do 6 groups of 2, like lacto fermentation, because there's so few ingredients and there's not a lot of moving around that's needed. It was always important for us to have chance for people to actually taste stuff, to bring home recipes. Whenever we were doing canning or preservation, they had the chance to bring home a jar of whatever we're making. And even with our preservation classes, for me, the be all end all is helping connect people to local ingredients and kind of demystifying that and making it more everyday. So we also did those things in season when they were available. So this would be an example, you know, we're in person and we're actually giving shout outs to the specific producers where we're getting that produce or meat or animal protein, dairy, et cetera. And that would just be woven into the fabric of the class. So this is an example of a year of classes that we had in person that were kind of all under the umbrella of celebrating local food. And these are, you can see it's a really motley crew in terms of the types of it, really wide breadth. And that's actually because it's based on the instructors. So I taught a couple of these classes, but others were, you know, approaching a local chef and asking what would be a topic that you would be really jazzed about sharing with the community. So some of them, there's a local business called Big Spoon Kitchen that really prioritizes sourcing local ingredients. So several of their cooks taught some of these classes. So that's again where we sought outside funding to pay instructors to come in and actually share. So usually those classes, there would always be at least 2 people. There'd be the person teaching and there'd always be a helper, because as you can imagine, looking at some of these things, it's a dish festival. So there's always a cleanup. That's one thing to keep in mind with in-person classes. You'll have a couple hours ahead of time getting, you know, prep stations if you want it to be a hands-on opportunity, and then you're going to have a bunch of cleanup. This is just an example of a couple of the, I'm kind of going on the year before and then 1 year of COVID programming online. So these are the activities that we had actually. And actually, I think we have him, if Jeff is on the line, from Cedar Hedge making goat cheese. That was a class, he was probably one of our very last in-person classes when they came up and taught a class in the Harvest Kitchen. So this is just an example, just a screenshot, you know, sending folks home with a recipe. They get a printout or a PDF and they can have the opportunity to get excited to do it in their own home. So then kind of moving online and thinking about what we were up to there, we had the opportunity to change it around a little bit. So a few things that we did differently when we were switching to an online setup is instead of limiting it to 12, because we had been prioritizing folks giving a chance to get in there and handle the ingredients, we weren't capping the class size. We switched, I mean, probably one of my favorite things about the switching online is being able to switch it to a sliding scale. So folks just self-determined what they were able to pay for a class. So we dropped the floor down to 0. And so it was a $0 to $30 self-selected registration. Folks, you know, they can sign up and receive the video, they'll get the PDF of the recipes, and we just had to clearly communicate about whether it was that you had the opportunity, that it was taught in a way that you could actually do it alongside at home and you're sending an ingredient list ahead of time, or if we're just sharing a skill and then you can watch the video later and kind of do it on your own at a different time. And that really depends on the topic, whether that is suitable for a do alongside with us at home kind of class. So do we have a sense of sort of the topics? You know, we have moved online. And in terms of the celebrating local food, these we did a hot sauce one. We grow a lot of peppers at our farm. So I taught a class I get really excited about herbs and peppers, just like being like superpowers of bringing flavor into dishes. So we did a few things around that, root vegetables, a sourdough 101, which was by far the least local and the most popular class online because it hit that fever pitch of people being enthusiastic about baking, and then making fruit curd with local fruits and things like that. So those were the celebrating local food classes, and then we had quite a few different food preservation classes. So I'm always a sucker for fermentation. That's why you see it on there a lot. That's why I really enjoy teaching that class, because I think it's empowering. It's relatively simple. It's inexpensive ingredient wise, but I think it just really opens a lot of people's minds and in terms of understanding this food that can be so healthful and not particularly complicated. Pressure canning, we do that one pretty regularly because that's the kind of the opposite end of the spectrum. People feel really fearful about it and feel like it's really complicated, but with some simple information and understanding, it doesn't have to be. And then we did a really fun making dairy products series. So just to get a sense of the two, so I just shared, 13 in-person classes that we did before COVID, and then online 13 classes. So you can see here, the online is basically the right bar for every single one. So if you're looking at the registrants, we're able to go from removing that 12-person cap in a year of programming and getting a little over 100 people to impacting, over 300 people with the registrants for classes. The income also increased. So I was very curious to know, if we remove it and say classes can be free in a world of online programming where you can just go around and find something free if you look for it long enough on the internet, no matter the quality, would anybody be willing to pay $20 or $30 for a class? And our proceeds, so our first 2 classes where we did sliding scale, they were less than or similar to, so you can do the math, 20 bucks. 12 people, $240. Again, we're an educational organization, so profit is not the primary priority. But when we went to online, as I mentioned, the sourdough was the most popular. So it's over $1,000 of that, nearly $5,000 is actually just the sourdough class because people were rabid about sourdough, I guess I would say. And then that is also the sourdough class because there were 58 people registered for that one class, but most of them, it was a little more sane than that. So, there might be maybe 15 or 25 people on a class. So that's kind of just the sense of the classes, comparing them side by side. I would love it if folks could type into the chat because this next section, I was excited to share it in case people are interested in going online, but it will help me know how deep to go in. Is your organization considering doing an online live class, and or have you already done it and you want to problem solve how to do it better? Because I have this section that's about equipment and about troubleshooting issues, but I want to make sure I'm meeting the needs of the group in terms of what you're curious about hearing about. So are you thinking about, so one person saying, nope, no online classes. The other thing is, I'm sure obviously AHI can be sharing these slides with you afterwards and I could answer questions. This technology, I'll guess maybe go through it more quickly if it's not a priority for people, but so we had the opportunity, we had funding that was supposed to be in-person programming. And then we got to the point where we couldn't do things in person. And so we asked our funder, which was the USDA, we asked them, can we buy some equipment with this? Because we can't do our in-person programming and our teaching supplies budget just doesn't need to do what we thought it needed to do anymore. So we had funding to basically invest in equipment. And so when we were thinking about those online classes, we were realizing that there's all of these elements. So not just a Zoom of just standing here and sharing a PowerPoint with you, but actually being able to show people into the cooking pot or be able to hear multiple people speaking. So there are all of these things that we just need to problem solve that you wouldn't need to do if you were in person, but you also wouldn't need to do if you were just standing on a Zoom and not having multiple people or multiple cameras or anything like that. And then how do you hear questions and answer questions and things like that. So I got help with somebody else locally that teaches does video stuff at Clarkson, and he helped kind of problem solve and figure out how to actually make it work, which, because he's a videographer, I'd say he created a more complicated system than some people might want, but it is really high quality. And now in terms of what we're able to do with the final product, there's a lot of opportunity. But I'd say if you are thinking about doing live online classes, they've been received really well. People have fun at them. Certainly some topics are more popular than others, but I didn't even talk about the geographic the geography, but I think everyone knows that about online, that before the folks that were coming at the Harvest Kitchen in-person classes, you know, even if we serve St. Lawrence County, our county is the biggest in the state. So someone might not drive an hour to come to an in-person class, but maybe it is worth it to hop online and get to see that in person and get to see that online, and still be able to ask questions and things like that. So we were getting, for some of the classes, you know, we had people from several different states or counties or regions. We do record the classes, Allison was asking, and I'm happy to, actually, I didn't get the link, but I can just share a link to, I have a collection of where the classes are. I'll just share it with the group. It would just take me some doing right at the end, but I'm happy to share that with you, Allison. Kind of moving on. I guess just to say, I wanted to show you one thing about what you're trying to do. So I'm going to play this video. It's about 1 minute, and it's just going to show you an example of multiple cameras and then a couple things about the video feed. And then so it's going to play for 1 minute and then I'll stop it.
Flip, does it come with audio?
You cannot hear the audio. Thank you, Sarah. This is where I have to remember to share it with the audio when I'm sharing the screen.
Exactly what I was just about to say to you. Perfect.
I know that. Damn. Okay. Okay. Oh no. I don't know if this is the fastest way to do this. We have a green cabbage here. Can you hear it now?
A variety.
Can you hear the audio now?
Yes, you're good now.
Okay. So yeah, again, I'm just showing you an example of like using 2 cams and hearing that audio, and then we'll talk about the feed in just a minute briefly.
That we grow specifically for sauerkraut called Caitlin, but you could use any cabbage. I'm going to mix a red one in as well, just because the green and the red actually form, they kind of blend and they actually form a pink trout, which is a little bit fun. But that's all I'm doing. And basically, I just have those 2 and I've taken the cores right out of them. So when you get to this next step, if you're thinking about the process, which is at the end, we basically want to make a salted, this was made earlier today. This is just, all this is shredded cabbage with salt and then submerged beneath its own brine. So
that's just an example of kind of a class in action, getting to see, you know, a straight up forward view and then doing whatever you want with cam 2. So that was just a boom stand, but you could put it wherever you want to get your second shot. So this is an example of the setup. So we actually often don't use this light, but you can have a light to get more even lighting. And again, this is Zach, the videographer, and this is where I think he tried to give us the very best setup, because that's when we could afford, not the very best, but like a setup that we could manage, but that was high quality. So I probably, if I've been doing it on my own, wouldn't have bought this light, but it is pretty sweet, and we can bring it into the field and into barns because we have a battery for it. So we could bring it anywhere without needing electrical, which is kind of sweet. You can see him setting up this second camera as a straight above shot from this boom stand right here. You can see this very first camera, which is our main camera. And then you can also see this monitor, which actually is recording it for later and is producing a cleaner feed. So
we have a green
right
cabbage.
here, you can see this is called not a clean feed. So this is from a GoPro. And so you can see, you know, the amount of battery power left, and you can see all this extra information. You can see the zoom information where it says Flip and Dottie. The reason I'm showing that to you is because is it most important to you to just teach a live online class and be one and done or is it important to you to have a video that then you're going to do something with and then try to make a highly produced end product, again, have a second product. So it's kind of hard to do both of them, but this is an example of what the Zoom does, and showing this without the clean feed and adding this in. And if you want to make a video with it afterwards, you may not want all those extra add-ins. And so that's where something like this monitor recorder could record it. So these are the parts of ours. And so again, we have the laptop, we have that monitor I pointed out. The switcher is what can move between the cameras really easily. And so you can't do that on Zoom. I can't just be talking to you now and then showing you an example of the harvest kitchen, because you can't plug in 2 different video feeds. And so that was something to troubleshoot. The microphones, so having multiple people being able to talk and not being able to have to toggle one on or off or change the setting. So it was important to us to be able to have at least 2 people in the space. They could be chatting with each other. Maybe they have different skill sets. Maybe there are different locations in the room. They're far apart from each other, but you could still hear them pretty crisply and clearly. So that's the parts to our setup. This is the thing called a switcher, which is just a small version of what any, TV producer or something is using, where you could actually plug in 4 different videos, and then you could do 2 different audios. So I'm just mentioning it because those are the sort of the things that we were troubleshooting when we were trying to figure out, well, we had really good success with in-person online, and people felt like they were right there and having a good time in person, and how do we recreate that to some degree online? So if you were thinking about doing online stuff, I would say just kind of get some assistance from someone else. And then once they have a sense of what your budget is and how much time and the number of people that might be on hand to help, then they can help plan out what it would look like. So getting help with the AV planning and then test running it, and then also having at least one other person in there. So this is just showing an example where we set it up where one camera was over here. This is pressure canning, and I'm over here doing the filling demos. And then Sam, the master food preserver, is over here with the canner. So we could just toggle back and forth if we wanted to show, he's just getting to the point where it's getting up to pressure and folks want to see that. We toggle back over and say, what's going on at the stove right now, Sam? And then he shares that information, and then we go back to cam 1. And we could do that easily. We just have to set it up appropriately on the front end and create that interactivity, which is what I feel like is the main thing that's lacking from the online world. The interactivity doesn't get you, it doesn't release as much good serotonin or whatever the thing is that makes you feel good actually being around people. So creating that interactivity to the best of your ability. So yeah, some topics are much easier to do. So thinking about the mechanics of what you're trying to actually do, and how would you make it work online? So as an example with the sourdough, obviously, if you've seen a cooking show, they did a bunch of work to make it look so easy and cram it into a half an hour. So we, created a short video to show those rising times, and then just showed that within the class. And then she was able to just form the loaves, make dough and form loaves, and then showed kind of the other parts of it and sort of piece it together. So that took some work on the front end. Julie's asking how we advertise our programs and find participants. So we have an e-newsletter that goes out once a week for CCE. We also, if anyone's ever taken a class, I just keep a simple email list. I don't actually spam them with anything else or any other CCE programming. It's just if you want to know when a new Harvest Kitchen class has been scheduled, then I send out an email and say, hey, like we have a yogurt class coming up at the beginning of April. So as soon as we've got all the materials together for that, we'll say, hey, join us. Jada's going to teach folks how to make yogurt at home. And then we do Facebook and to a lesser degree Instagram promotion stuff. We have volunteers. So we have a volunteer group of master food preservers. It's a really fairly small group, but we have another training coming up in June. I love having another set of hands on. I would always in a kitchen class, whether it was online or in person, like to have 2 to 3 people in total. So the teacher and then 1 or 2 helpers. Julianne, I'll just give you the, I'll just share all the recorded classes that we have. Once we get to the questions point, I can pop that in the chat. Julie's asking how the participants learn about CCE. That's probably a question, honestly, all in and of itself, because we're just one association. So I work in St. Lawrence County, but there's extensions all over the state and then beyond. And so we have a funny situation where we might be doing some really specific, fun, unique programming possibly, but if you're not tuned into that specific counties association, or another word for a cooperative extension, then maybe you're not hearing about it. So usually people are just getting on, getting on the mailing lists or following on Facebook or something like that, I would say. But even in our area, we probably have people on the call from 4 or 5 or 6 different counties. And that means that there's actually 6 different associations with 6 different ag departments that all have educators with different specialties. So I'm a local food program person, but in Essex, if Megan's doing farm to institution stuff, and maybe in Clinton County, someone's doing, orchard. Well, I don't think they do have an orchard person, but there might be different specialists. So that's something that's unique about the extension system. But if you do want to sign up for classes, I'll just put this in, you could sign up that way. So I think I just have a couple more of these, and then we'll get right into questions, because I'd love to hear from you all. I mentioned that idea of, what do they get for participating? And so going online, I think you probably all know this for your own farms and organizations, but you just have to be clear, are they getting the recording? Are they able to buy the ingredients ahead of time and cook it alongside of you? Or are they just seeing someone else doing it? Are they just watching a slideshow? What's the actual experience that they're signing up for? Because there are so many variations about the types of experiences that you could be providing. I'd like to work more into, so we've done it a couple times, but I'd like to work in more like guest cameos. So I was just talking, Dan mentioned about doing something, like if we could have Dan as a guest from Triple Green Jade. So maybe we are making, we're having a class, and then he could zoom in for a few minutes and be like, oh, let's hear from a producer. And then he gives us a couple tips. And so I think that's a way that we can layer in more beyond just the cooking experience and letting people know the sources of the food, but also to layer in that producer experience or hearing from other people to kind of expand the understanding of the local food system and accessing and preparing the foods. So I did just pop it in the chat if you want to sign up for our e-newsletter or for our cooking classes, just to get the notice when we have new ones going. And then, yeah, I think I kind of already touched on this, but what do you actually need the recording, and what's the purpose of the recording? Are you trying to edit it and then produce it into something else that's really shiny and bright? Or are you just trying to let folks that signed up but didn't get a chance to attend a chance to see it? Because I think those are 2 different AV qualities, and that would affect your decisions. I think now that we've done it a couple times, I originally had this like miracle version where we recorded the class and then we edit it down to, whatever, a 15-minute version. And then we had a more bite-sized version of, this one was really fun. She did a quick mozzarella, Gail, and it was really a blast. This is the only one we've actually edited down to a shorter version, but the time and the bandwidth that it would take for us to do that wasn't really realistic that we would do that for every class. So maybe we would do it for specific topics, but I think it'd be a lot better to just produce a shorter video and write a script and have a video treatment that actually addressed those specific things than try to take 2 hours or 90 minutes of tape and then reduce it beautifully down to that shorter. That's my opinion after a bit of time. But again, I didn't come from a background of this videography or production. It's just kind of learning on the fly and trying to put it all together. I don't think we need to play this. I think that was just talking about like quality stuff, so I'm not going to play that. So I just want to leave time for folks to kind of pick out the parts that they're most interested in talking about, because I know that was a lot of material and it's pretty diverse in terms of what your actual goals are, what you're trying to do in your own organizations and businesses.
So Flip, I just want to make sure you saw the question from Dan. Any notion if the class participation has led to desirable outcomes outside of just participating in the class as enjoyment, buying local, added farmer support, starting a garden, etc.?
Yeah, that's an awesome question, Dan. So as of now, the only post follow-up feedback that we ask, we have a really simple survey that says, you know, how important was it that the ingredients were sourced locally? You know, do you have the confidence to replicate this recipe in your own home kitchen? Do you, if this class was offered again, what would you include in it? Ideas for other classes. So we haven't done any follow-up survey or evaluations with folks. We just get their feedback right as they've taken the class, and then they go on their merry way. I think it is really a good idea, and it even seems like it'd be awesome to do a kind of regional experience of gauging various either public awareness or demonstrations or activities or educational opportunities related to local food, and then gauging the actual response or outcomes from it. But that's not something I've delved into deeply yet, Dan, and it's really important. So the platform that we used was called StreamYard. There's several. StreamYard, you can do, it's a monthly, so you could pay $25 a month and then just do the streams on there. You have the chance, it automatically records on there and it records the audio, so you can download the video or the audio straight from it. You can stream to several platforms at once, but I believe it's just because Instagram is crabby, but you can't actually stream to Instagram. They want you to use their own Instagram-y thing, just to show my ignorance, because I know that's not the technical language. So even though Facebook and Instagram are owned by the same people, you can't actually stream to Instagram. It's very unfortunate, but we stream to YouTube and Facebook simultaneously. You could stream to LinkedIn and some other things that I don't pay attention to, but once you have it set up on there, you're basically, your guests are all joining there, but then everybody watching it is watching it on those platforms that it's streaming to. And you can see the questions coming in, you can see the likes and the comments and things like that, but you can also add banners and things like that.
And then Mary asked, how do you work with producers and farmers with limited time to participate in your events? Do you offer a stipend? How do you work around their schedules?
So when we have, so I guess in terms of the various ways that producers have, so for the live stream, I guess as one example, well, two examples I could think of, and one would be when Dan, just joined us for a class recently and gave his perspective, and one was the live stream, the marketing. The live stream, we framed it as a marketing opportunity, an optional marketing opportunity for people to share about their business with the community. So we did not compensate them for their time. I told them that I thought it would take 60 to 90 minutes of their time, basically between maybe sending us a couple pictures if there was something really specific that they wanted to share that we didn't already have in terms of photos, in terms of getting on the test run with me sometime the week before it and make sure their audio and video worked, and then the actual 15 minutes of the live stream. So that was an optional opportunity, and we didn't compensate them for that. We have sought funding from multiple different organizations, whether it's from the USDA or the Workforce Development Institute or the Alcoa Foundation, to compensate people for spending their time. So since I've been at Cooperative Extension in St. Lawrence County for the last 5 years, I guess we've sought funding from about 4 different places and building in contracted services so that we could compensate farmers. So for example, last year we did a poultry processing tour. So we went to 2 different facilities. Farmers got to see those other people's facilities, and then we compensated them for sharing and letting us host. And so that's really dependent, I guess, on the different activities. We make them optional, so someone's not required to participate if they feel like it's worth their time. I think Dan Rivera can comment if he feels like, if he has other things to add, but I'd say we try to just make it clear what we're asking, give a sense of how much time it might take, and then they can just evaluate whether it's worth it for them.
That's great. Thank you. And Claudia put a great comment in the chat, not so much a question, but that she'd love to see more connectivity with SUNY Plattsburgh and organizations like this. She mentioned a nutrition club that sponsors presenters to speak at the club every so often. But I mean, do you do any sort of partnering with universities in St. Lawrence County? I know there are a few.
Let's see. Yeah, I mean, we definitely partner with universities in various ways. I mean, in the summertime, you know, I have an intern from a group called the Public Interest Corps at St. Lawrence. We host interns all the time through the community health program at SUNY Potsdam and things like that. I have a community-based learning student coming in this afternoon, and he's working actually on master food preserver volunteer materials and things like that, because we have a training coming up. I don't know that that's necessarily what, that's maybe not the kind of connectivity that she was talking about necessarily, but we certainly have students interacting with us regularly on various projects and internships and things like that. And then actually, I guess I should just say, just because the learning farm, we have an anaerobic digester that all the food waste from the harvest kitchen goes to, and that's actually managed by a Clarkson University faculty member. And so he always has work study students that are feeding the digester and collecting data and things like that.
That's great. Are there any more questions for Flip? If you have any, please put them in the chat. I do have one. If nobody else has one, I'll be happy to ask mine. I'm curious about if you collect demographic information of your participants, and if going online you saw that made the classes more accessible for people. I know this is something that comes up often in the Food Justice Summit. And did sliding scale help you reach more people?
I think, well, the easy part of your question was sliding scale helped us reach more people. And then everything else you asked was way more difficult. So I might possibly be the worst example at our local cooperative extension about collecting demographic data. I've always had like a knee-jerk reaction. I don't like to fill out I don't like to fill out a long class registration that has a million questions and they're asking demographic data. At the end of the day, that is basically what everyone does. And I just finally started adopting it. And I'm surprised my executive director didn't tell me I needed to do that sooner, because I was trying to do it on the tail end with the evaluations. I just don't think it's a very welcoming way for people to first, you know, you get excited about cooking root vegetables, and then you're having to enter a lot of data in just to join the class. So I don't personally, as like a consumer experience, think it's great. But I guess the reality of it for us as a nonprofit organization that is receiving federal, state, and county dollars, I have to get on board and just figure out ways to make it less intimidating. And so I know that we're reaching more people. The thing about the live stream, I guess, in terms of the, well, there's two separate things. Well, Megan and other Essex County Association people will know this. There's things that we call directs and indirects. So the live streams actually were only considered indirects. Like, we don't have the specific contact information. So even if we have 300 people watching an interview and they learn about 3 new farms and they may, you know, maybe even go and support those farms, it's still not considered a direct contact for us, because we didn't collect any information unless we had asked them to register, which we weren't. It was just a free live stream. Whereas for the classes that they are registering and we are collecting at this point now, only very late to the game, are collecting that demographic data right from the get-go.
Great, thanks for clarifying that, Flip.
Sure.
It doesn't seem like there are any more questions coming in the chat. So just want to thank you for the presentation. I think it was wonderful and very informative for all of us. We'll give a few minutes back to everyone's schedules today. Big thank you to all of you for participating. And our next session will be a lunchtime discussion if you'd like to hop on at noon. So hopefully we'll see you all then. Thank you.
Yeah, if you don't leave the session quite yet, I will pop in this live from the harvest session. I just got it, so I can click I'll share the link, and there's probably a handful of videos in there if people want to see it. It's just on Cornell Video on Demand. So I think we have, you know, a half a dozen classes in there. And you're welcome to check them out.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Are we waiting for anything else to go into the chat, Flip?
Well, are people going to see the chat later?
Yep, all of the sessions are recorded and will be available on our website.
Oh, okay. I thought the chat, I didn't realize this chat could be saved with the session. Yeah, I think I put the stuff in there that I wanted to. Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So I'll give another second here if anybody wants to copy and paste that link so that they have it. But then I think we are all set as far as questions are concerned. So thank you again, Flip, for the great presentation, and thank you, Megan, for facilitating. And I'm going to go ahead and end the session now.
Take care, everybody. Thanks a lot.